Hey, I thought last Sunday was terrific. I just want to thank the staff and all of those who made that possible. It was a great day. I walked in there Saturday, I think, no, Friday. I walked in the gym. I was doing something coming through, and I saw one of the guys setting all those tables up, and I thought, there must be something going on tomorrow, Saturday. And then it dawned on me, they're getting ready for that 20-year anniversary deal, and that whole room was full of tables. And I went back and told Ruby, I said, I think y'all are being a little optimistic. But it looked like we needed most of the tables, and I know most of you came last Sunday for the food, because I'm looking at the attendance this morning. We're not eating any food, and there's some people not here, so obviously it was for the food. But as we went through the day last Sunday, I started taking notes somewhere in the morning, and I thought I would respond to last Sunday. Don't you think that'd be a good idea? Well, a few of you do. Some of you that weren't here probably don't know what I'm talking about. But I appreciated the panels. There was a panel of 3 in the first service, a panel of 4 in the second. First service, John Vance, Bill Park, Terry Haig. But I need to respond to some of those things. John Vance started talking about how tenacious I am when I get on a project. I'm like a bulldog, go to it. And then he started talking about this coyote hunt he and I went on with a few others, and that we were out and I saw this coyote and shot and missed. For those of you that probably didn't hear it, you weren't in the first service. I just want to point out that I was using his gun, and I shot and missed. I told him after that, you need to have this gun sighted in. He was making fun of my marksmanship. And I was talking to my barber. I went and got a haircut recently, and I was telling him about this 20th celebration coming up. He said, well, when our pastor got to 15 years, John Vance, that the church got him a new pickup truck. And the videos, those were fun. The bishop talked and, recognized the accomplishment of 20 years. Joe Broom said some great words, and, Joe and Kaylee met here at New Covenant. I was pleased that Brandon and Tyler Grissom were on there. Those boys grew up in Prague, Oklahoma, and Brandon leads worship now at one of the largest churches in North America, Willow Creek Community Church in Chicago, and it was good to hear the part that we played in their lives and development. Tyler, I remember when we'd hired Brandon, and Tyler was coming to UCO to go to college, and he was wanting to work at the church, and he came and interviewed with me, and he wanted to do college ministry. And it was one of the strangest interviews. Tyler had joined a fraternity, and they were going through Rush, and they had about 30 pledges. And Tyler said, I'm praying that all of those 30 are non-Christians. And I said, why is that? He said, it gives me 30 opportunities to bring 30 guys to know Jesus. And when he said that, I thought, we need to hire this guy. And we hired Tyler, and he built a college ministry of about over 100 kids from UCO involved in college ministry. They got involved in student mobilization and another number of other things. It was good to hear from him. Good to hear from Sean Van Landingham. Confession is good for the soul. When Sean said we went down to church and played video games and watched movies on the big screen, Star Wars, I think he said. Luke Corbett. We all know Luke. I was so excited when Luke was sharing in that video that he was expressing a deep concern for me. When he started talking about the exercise equipment, the treadmill, the Bowflex, and I thought, he's going to give that to me. He is so concerned about my physical prowess that that didn't happen. But it caused me to remember some things. Memories are good. I enjoyed the pictures in the slideshow. The one picture of my good friend who passed away about a year ago, Johnny Ray Watson. He and I used to do revivals together out in West Texas and Western Oklahoma, and big basketball player, African-American guy, who they call the Chocolate Mountain, had a tremendous voice, and went to be with Jesus. And the picture of Scott and I sitting in the stadium, the backstory of that is it was a Promise Keeper rally in Dallas, and I was sitting by Clyde Lowry, and Haddon Robinson, the homiletics teacher, the preaching teacher at Gordon Cromwell, was talking about the relationship between father and son and how important that is and how we shape that relationship and what the father's role in shaping the son. And I was sitting there talking to Clyde, and neither one of our sons were there, and I said, boy, it'd be neat if Scott were here. And all of a sudden Scott walked in because the Promise Keeper guys from New Covenant had paid his plane ticket and flew him from Pennsylvania when he was in college to Dallas to be a part of that. I'm just going to tell you, there was a bit of a meltdown in that moment. Those are great memories, and I won't soon forget those. I think the thing that struck me as I listened last Sunday, Bill Parks talks about his involvement here. They've only been here a couple of years. I first met Bill. I was invited to be the spiritual director on a walk to Emmaus years and years ago at First Methodist Church in Oklahoma City. And there were two guys there that I met. One guy's name was Jim Decker, and the other was Bill Parks. And I thought these guys are so incredible that if I could ever serve and pastor a church that had those kind of guys in it, we could do a lot of things. And I came to New Covenant, and Jim Decker was a part of this church, Jim and Nancy, and then Bill and Leslie came 2 or 3 years ago. But one of the things that Bill said is that it's clear that Adrian doesn't make this about him, and that's been intentional. I mean, you go on the website, you don't see my face up there, and part of the tension that we live in this culture, we live in a fame culture. We're all about popularity and celebrities, and the only thing that is of any celebrity status that I have, I know my physique is close to that, my looks, but I guess the only thing that would get me close to that is my trophy wife. That's all I can think of. That would be. Points there, man. And trophy grandson, yeah, that's right, Mads. Kendall talked about me being an encourager and a man's man, and a trait mentioned life lessons about being a parent, being a dad and a mom, and Margene Beckman talked about the imprint, the burning of that verse of Scripture, 2 Timothy 2:2. And basically it says, what I've heard and received from others I take and now pass on to faithful people who will in turn pass that on to others. That is the essence of discipleship. And I hope you know that verse, because we want to imprint that verse in the culture of New Covenant. And culture is important. We can make strategies and plans, and we can develop programs and systems, but Peter Drucker, the father of modern day management, said once that culture eats strategy for breakfast. When you build those things into the culture, it stays. Donna Weaver, when Donna was talking, and consistently people talked about my witness of Christ in my life, and Donna mentioned that, and I want to tell you that I'm a fourth generational Methodist. My mom and dad were Methodist, although not the greatest examples for part of their adulthood, but they got with the program later. My grandparents, my grandpa and grandma were Methodist. My great-grandparents were Methodist. And one of the things that when I gave my life to Jesus, it was a wreck in a good way. because I was going in a direction that was not good, and God turned me around. And so in the little church that I grew up in, it was straight Methodist worship. It was the liturgy. It was the collets and the responsive readings of the Psalter, and it was formal, and we call that Methodist worship. And I grew up kind of at times close to that and times distant to that. But all that growing up in that little church, no one ever told me that I needed to know Jesus personally. And I decided that if I was going to be a pastor of a local church that was Methodist, one of the things I was going to make sure of is people understood that all of this is about, it all hinges on a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I want to tell you, the notes and cards have been just great. We appreciate your words of encouragement and all the things you said. There's a little bit of hate mail in some of those, but that's okay. I mean, it reminded me of some of the bloopers that sometimes have happened here in these 20 years. I thought I might talk about those for a minute. I remember when we implemented contemporary worship, we were the first Methodist church at the primary worship hour on Sunday morning to do contemporary worship in the state of Oklahoma. Now that was pretty risky in those days, and we did it in a way. There was first service, and then Sunday school, and then second service at 11. This was traditional worship, Sunday school traditional worship, and so we put the contemporary worship service at 9:30 right during the Sunday school hour. And the Sunday that we launched that contemporary worship, 40 people left. But the church filled up. That service, the capacity of the worship center was only about 300 or so. And we said, well, we'll get our worship down, we'll perfect it, and we'll advertise. Well, Brandon Jackson was leading worship, and we launched that, and that service just filled up. The first service was full, and it stayed full every Sunday just about. And the second service at 11, which was traditional, was also full. And we were firing on all cylinders in those days. Church was just exploding. And then the 11 o'clock service that was traditional, the attendance just started kind of eking down. And we were going, what's that about? I think last week they said that one of my favorite expressions is, what's that about? Somebody said the Eskimo Joe look. And what's that about? And so we just kept watching it. It went from 300 to 280 to 240, 200, and I started getting concerned. And we started trying to speculate why, what's going on. And the best thing that we could conclude was it was declining, trickling down, because we needed to make that traditional 11 o'clock service contemporary. And so when it got down to 140, we changed the worship style to contemporary. Let me just say to you, and some of you remember that were here, is it got nasty. We had about 40 or so people that left, and heartbreaker. It was tough. And we changed it to contemporary, and we were setting in a pastor-parish relations. That's kind of a personnel supervisory committee, pastor-parish relations team. If you ever have a complaint about Shelley or Jay or one of the staff, call the PPR. Jim Hines is on there. Amy Foskin. Talk to them. They'll help you. And so we were sitting in one of those PPR meetings about 2 months after we'd made that change, and a guy named Francis and Janine, great people, moved to Houston about a year after that. Francis said this. He said, I don't think that decline in worship was about the worship style at all. He said, I think it was a parking problem. He said that, and I thought, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And the more he talked, I thought, oh my gosh, he may be right. And the next Sunday, we put monitors, people out in the parking lot to watch. And what was happening is that 9:30 service was jammed up, and we'd dismiss a little late, which never happens now. And people wouldn't get in their cars. They would stand around in the atrium in the hallway talking, and it would get close to 11, and they were still talking and visiting with friends, and people were trying to come to the 11 o'clock service, and they'd drive in one entrance, and there was no parking, and they'd drive out the other. And we thought, my gosh, he is right. We went through all of that, well, I'll just say crap, over a parking issue. That's a blooper. That's one of those big faux pas. Chuck Schillings became the chair. We raised $65,000 and put a new parking lot. It's still there on the north side of that building over on 15th Street. But that's a big mistake. I'll tell you another big mistake. Y'all interested in these? We moved over here, and Henderson Hills was taking a while to get their building built, and they kept delaying. We were supposed to get in there in December, and here it was the end of May, and summertime is tough to get anything going. And we said, well, we'll do a combined worship. We'll put all of our traditional and contemporary service people together. Not good. The traditional people said, we know what you're trying to do. You're trying to do away with traditional worship. You devil. And we said, no, we're not. We're just trying to get by the summer. No, you're not. You're doing. And so I said, well, let's do this. Let's start a traditional worship service down in the Great Hall. And we did. And we filled that thing up. Had over 200 people the first service. And then they started, and I would go down there and preach in the first part of the hour and come down here and preach in the last part of the hour. And then people got to saying down there, we paid as much money to get in here as they did who are here. And we're down there in that little crappy room. And I said, okay, let's do this. Let's all move. We'll move our traditional worship down here at 8:45, 8:30, I think it was. And they agreed, and we did. But then this room looked so large. I mean, you come in here, and if you're a visitor, it looked like there's about 3 people here. And we said, we got to do something because visitors were leaving. And so I'd been down to Rock Point Community Church in Rockwall, Texas, or Lake Point. And they had this great big sanctuary, and they'd done this brilliant thing. They put cloth over the pews. And so I thought, that's the solution. So we put black cloths over those pews in the back. We repurposed those cloths, though. You know what we did? They're there. We took those black cloths. Yeah, we reused them. That's being good stewards of God's stuff, you know. I mean, those are kind of some of the bloopers that were going on. But as we went through last Sunday, and all the panel was talking, Donna was talking about the focus on Jesus. And she was talking about change. She mentioned change, risk, and change. And I thought, you know, I bet people wonder, why can't we do worship like we did in Carnegie when I was growing up? Why don't we do responsive readings from the Psalter, or pray collets, or certain kinds of prayers? Or why has the church changed and shifted? And why are we still changing and shifting? Well, here's the reason. It's because the culture we live in is always changing. If we stay at one point, the culture is eventually going to move away from us. I mean, I got an email from Sam Powers, the pastor at First Methodist Church uptown yesterday, and they're having at 3:30 today a special concert of sacred music from a music director from Park Avenue United Methodist Church in Charlotte, and all of Wesley's hymns. And I thought, you know, I love sacred music. I love to listen to organ music. Why don't we do that here? I mean, if I love it, why? It's because that's not where our culture is. We're trying to be relevant to the culture so that Christ can be relevant to people. And so it involves change and risk and change, and we're always trying to respond to that. And what I heard people say last Sunday is what I call these DNA themes. What is the makeup of New Covenant? What is our culture? What are we about? We're about this DNA, and the first thing on my list, and the first thing I heard people talk about last Sunday, is Jesus. As part of our DNA is Jesus. We wouldn't exist as a church without Jesus. The second thing is risk and change as part of the DNA of New Covenant, always responding to what's going on in the culture. The third thing is, I was reading Jim Osier. We had him here a couple of times. Christy Germany's here this morning. Christy, good to see you. And through Christy's influence, we got Jim Osier to come. He's the Congregational Development Director at North Texas Conference. And I was reading his book yesterday, Clip In, and he was saying churches today have to have amped up high levels of hospitality, welcoming people and being friendliness. And that's part of our DNA. Part of our DNA is it's not about me. I'm gonna be gone one of these days. And somebody else is going to come. And if it's about me, then church goes through a crisis. It's about vision. I believe that God dreams dreams, and He dreams them in us. And if we're bold enough to believe that God's saying something to us, and that's God's vision, then we have the opportunity to put our hands to the plow and take a concept, an idea, and make it happen where it becomes a reality in the hearts and lives of people. I heard a DNA theme last week of spiritual growth. We focus and emphasize our need to grow in this relationship to Christ. As I was going through that list and writing down, typing up my notes, I got to asking myself this question. What was missing last Sunday? I'm sure if everybody would have had a chance to speak, you would have said it. And there's probably a lot of things. I only listed 2 things that I thought could have been said last week that probably should have been. Here's one. Here's the first one. It's not the most important one, but it's an important one to me, is I think church ought to be fun. I think there's some serious stuff that goes on here. There are people with broken hearts and broken lives, and there are people that have eternity in the balance. But there's no reason we can't have fun being with God and each other. And I believe in having fun. That's part of the chemistry. So we could have said that. Here's the last one I thought we could have said that kind of bothered me, to be truthful, is we said all these things about the themes of DNA: Jesus, change, hospitality, not centered on the pastor, vision, spiritual growth. The thing that kind of concerned me about what I didn't hear being said was we exist as a church to reach people for Jesus who don't go to church here yet. Is evangelism and outreach. Is that part of our DNA has to be a concern for the people who don't know Jesus or don't have a church home. And that's got to be part of our vision. That's got to be part of our DNA, part of our culture, is reaching people for Jesus. That's got to be part of the legacy. Legacy. Nathan Cates, our director of student ministry, called me a couple weeks ago and said, I'm talking to interns for the summer, and I want you to interview a couple of people. And so we set up these interviews, one with Grant Rubin. He's going to be an intern. Rubens were here back in the 90s and are back. And then I had an interview with Katie Pruitt. Katie's 19. She wasn't born when we came, and she grew up here and is now going to come on staff as one of the interns. Legacy. And then I came to this final question, and I want to say a couple of things. Here's the question I asked myself. All of you have been asking this question. Some of you have been asking this question for probably about 20 years. Bruce Winston and Kay were here last Sunday, And I reminded Bruce that he was the chair of that PPR team when I came. And so if you have any problem with me being here at any point in these 20, talk to Bruce. He's responsible for it. It's his fault. But here's the question I came to is, why have I stayed this long? Why have I stayed this long? Trust me, I'm not going to be here in the future as long as I've been here in the past. Unless, we could start planning the next 20-year celebration, but I might be kind of decrepit. Why have I stayed this long? Well, let me answer the question from my perspective. Is we're not finished. We've come a long way, but we're not finished. We've got the facility, the parking, the staff. We've got the congregation. We've got everything poised to do what God wants us to do, but we're not finished. And we're in a position, a mode, a place right now of change again. Restructuring staff and creating some new positions. And one of the positions we're excited about is connection ministry, because one of the things we've heard from multiple places, from different people saying the same thing, is connection ministry is important. When you hear multiple people from different places saying the same thing, you better start paying attention, because it very well could be that God is speaking something to you. Connection ministry, one of the things we've learned is when somebody right now comes to the New Covenant, we collect their contact information. We send them a letter. We say, we're going to have pizza with the pastor. Come and find out, meet some of the staff. Eat some great Marco's pizza or Little Caesar pizza or something, and it'll be good, and you'll enjoy it, and you'll find out a little bit about the church, and we'll tell you what the next step is. And then we tell them at Pizza with the Pastor, well, you can go to Starting Point, and that's 12 weeks, but if you come in October, you're going to have to wait till January. And to make a long story short or longer, sometimes it takes a person a whole year to really get connected in a serve way at New Covenant right now. Jim Osier told us at the workshops that he did when he came is that the growing churches are discovering that they need to start getting people involved when they come into the door, maybe the third week, fourth week, fifth week, sixth week, instead of a year. Why? Well, one of the reasons is the longer we stay in a church, what happens is our friendship base increases in the church we're in. We develop a lot of friends in the church. We have more friends in the church a lot of times than we have outside the church. And so who are you going to invite to church if all your friends are already going to the church you're going to? That's a problem. Well, they've discovered that if you start getting people involved who come into your church, is their friendship base is larger outside the church than it is inside the church. And if you give them a place and they get involved and they say, this is my church, is they'll start recommending their church to the friends that are outside of that church, and the church starts growing. This may cause us to blow some things up that we're used to. We started talking this week, well, we could do this connection ministry. We could have a group that was in charge of widgets, and somebody said, well, what could we put them under? Well, we could put them maybe under adult discipleship, and I said, well, maybe they don't need to be put under anything. Maybe we need to put adult discipleship under that. It may cause us to rethink some things, to revamp some things. And here's what I know as we come to close. Is somebody told me that heard me talking about this, that they said this. They said, I don't think this is going to have any impact at all. Let me tell you this. If you don't think this is going to work, guess what? In my Carnegie way, I would say it ain't going to work. If we already set out that scripture in Nehemiah 6, God had sent the Jews back to the Holy Land, back to Jerusalem. Nehemiah was rebuilding the wall. The people that lived there, Sanballat and Tobias and Geshem, they said, what is he doing? This doesn't belong to him. He's doing something different. And Sanballat sent Nehemiah a letter And the letter said, why don't you come and meet with us on the plains of Oh No? I want you to know some of the changes that we've done over the 20 years at New Covenant. People have said, oh no. We've been to the plains of Oh No, haven't we? And if we have that attitude going into this connection ministry, that we're headed to the plains of oh no, it's not going to work. On the other hand, if we believe God is speaking to us, if we believe that God, the Holy Spirit, is saying from multiple people in multiple places the same thing, and we believe God is moving us, then everything becomes possible. That's what I think is next. Why have I stayed so long? Some of you think because I'm crazy. But I believe God's not done with us. And if you believe that, I invite you to respond as the Holy Spirit leads you. We